What's up guys? Well, this is just going to be a short video on how I set up an aftermarket sender unit, the fuel tank sender unit. Now, this is just a generic off-the-shelf eBay unit, and what we want to do is I'm going to set it up in this tank so that we have the correct throw on the arm and the correct depth within the tank itself. So let's get started. So first thing we need to do is determine where it's actually going to go in the tank. I'm choosing this location here. Now that's where the original one went, up there, but I cannot fit it there because there is also a fuel pickup and other magudgeons that all sit in there, so I can't really cut that up, but I have chosen this location just here. Now, I've looked at the bottom of the tank. This section on the bottom is actually nice and free, and when the sender unit, when the float actually comes up, it's going to be pointing in this direction. There is enough clearance here so it will not interfere with that little divot there. So, here we go. Oh good, battery's dead. Let me go get this charged up. So first thing we're going to do is, I have got the hole cut now. It took a little bit of messing about because it is cold here today and it is just killing the batteries and the drills. So very first thing we're going to do is determine how deep we can go. So we are at approximately 7¼ That's what's that, 180 mil, give or take. Actually a little bit more. Let me just double check that again. Yeah, about 7¼ So first thing we've got to determine is the length of this. Now I know this is already too big, I do know that, so just actually going to just drop them in there. When it comes to the size of the hole, ideally you want to be as small as possible, but anyway, so yeah, obviously we are way too tall on that. So what I'm going to do is, before I start messing about with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at shortening this here. So I'm going to put a marker line across here, cut it, and that will allow me to slide this up and down. So I think the first thing to do is get rid of this zip tie right there. So now that we have this sliced, what this will allow me to do is, it's difficult to do because I'm holding the camera in one hand because I forgot my tripod. Anyway, by sliding this, let me see, wait a moment, I have a plan. Okay, I'm not sure how well this is going to work, but we'll try it here. Basically the idea is I've sliced that and then I can slide this up and down to the desired height. I will then drill it and put a rivet in, and that will, yeah, that should work. I've done this before and it does work, but you know, there's always the potential for something to go catastrophically wrong. But anyway, that's what I'm going to do next. So, as you can see, I've shortened this down considerably, but at this point, this arm, it's got way too much movement in it. So, the next step is we've got to determine how we can shorten this arm so that we get a maximum of 7 inches travel on it. So, we have got to shorten this arm so we get a maximum of 7 inches travel. So what I'm going to do now is, we have this tape measure here, so if we take 7 inches from there, then that level there is where the float must be on 0, empty. So let's try and figure this out, shall we? Okay, so now I've got the arm cut and I've pulled it as far down as I can take it. So what I'm going to do is just drill a hole there, just drop the pot rivet in, and I'm just going to use that way for the moment. I'm not going to put any more in until I'm absolutely happy with the dimensions that I've got. So yeah, let's get that fixed and then we'll figure out the swing on this arm. So what we've got to do is figure out this. So when that float was all the way down at the bottom there, come on, stay. You've got to figure 7 inches down to where that float is at its minimum. So let's just have a bit play around with this, see what we can do. So if we look at what I've done here, I measured down 7 inches and I figured out approximately where that would be a low point on here. So what I did was I then bent an upward angle onto the rod. Obviously you've got to take up the actual dimensions of the float. So I put a bend in there and then I've put a parallel bend in here. Now this is the level the float will sit at when it's at its minimum. However, obviously if the float is on its end here, when we go up to full, the float is going to be way up there. So ideally we want the float to be about there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a right angle in there. Actually I might bring it down just a little bit so it's about there. I did have a Sharpie, I've lost it. Wait a moment. Sharpie retrieved. So if okay, so we have the float, and if we want the float to max out at about there, because we do want a little bit of spare capacity in the tank, so if we max it out about there, so right there is just below, that will have that sitting just below the maximum in the tank, and then when it is down, obviously that'll sit there, and that will give it a little bit of extra. So basically when it's on empty you've still got maybe, I don't know, half a gallon, well maybe not half a gallon, maybe quarter of a gallon left. So yeah, I'm not explaining myself very well, but the idea is that we bring the float down this rod here, it'll actually sit like that. And that should give us the throw that we need to give minimum and maximum in this tank. Anyway, let me just have a bit more play around with it. I'm pretty sure that's it, but I just want to double check everything, because once I cut this, yeah, we're in a world of pain if I get it wrong. So let me just double check my measurements. So for the float at its maximum droop, as you can see there, that gives us about about 6.5, and then that gives us about a half inch. Gives us about a half inch leeway for the float, because like I said, I don't want the float to hit the bottom of the tank when the gauge is reading empty, so I want that little bit of safety margin. So what I'm going to do is I am going to bend it at that mark there, put a right angle on bringing it out, and then we can get this float on and we can give it a test fit. Okay, so I have done a little bit more tweaking, and as you can see there, the float sits just above the 7-inch mark, so that should give me a reasonable safety margin. When the gauge is reading empty, you know, there's still fuel in the tank. But when it comes up to the max, you can see it will sit basically close to the top of the tank. So I am happy with that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do a test fit in this tank. Now, this is not the tank it's going in. This is just a tank that I had laying around. But don't panic, this tank leaks. So that's why I'm happy to cut holes in it just to do test fittings and what have you. So what I'm going to do next is I'll actually take the bolts out of it. I don't need the bolts in, but I can stick this in. I can get my hand in here and just feel around on the inside of the tank, and then I can determine exactly where. So yeah, let's get to it. So I've done the first test fitting, and what I've determined is that float can go just a little bit lower. So I'm going to adjust that now, and yeah, we'll take it from there. So I have gone back and forth, and this is the final shape that I've ended up with. Now, the only thing that I need to be a little bit concerned about is see how that lower bend is lower than the actual float itself. I do need to get that back into the tank. I've just noticed it, and I want to make sure that that itself is not interfering with the float. Namely, that is actually touching the bottom of the tank before the float is touching the bottom. So let me just check on that just to be sure. Okay, I have made one final adjustment to the float. So basically the base of the float is in line with that actual bend there. Now, I've tried it through its full range of travel, and everything is working fine. So I am happy with that. Yeah, the next step is I am going to fit it to the main tank on the van. So it's basically it's just a lot of trial and error. Once you get your basic height of the depth of your tank, then you can start figuring out all of these bends, but you've really got to get this correctly lengthened first. Now, if you've got a much deeper tank, you run into the opposite problem where you've then got to start lengthening this, and again it's a case of basically put it in, try it, and a lot of putting it in, taking it out, putting it in, taking it out. Now, we are fortunate on this tank because where I'm fitting this allows me, I can still get access through the original location for the original sender unit. But unfortunately, that's not always available. When you don't have access like I have on this tank here, one thing I have done in the past is put some paint. You want paint that doesn't dry quickly either on the bottom of the float. Put it in and see if you get a mark on it, and adjust it down until you actually get a mark in the paint, and then bring it back just a small amount. Something else you can do is basically you need to know the thickness of your tank. Now, this is a plastic one, so it is actually quite thick. It's probably almost a quarter of an inch thick, but put a straight edge along this top end, and then that will give you a guideline as to where the float will be in its upper position. But again, it's a very simple technique, and it always works. It's just patience. One thing you do have to be careful of though with these rods is try not to bend them too many times, because obviously you get stress fractures and it will eventually break off completely. The other thing that I'm going to do, where I shortened this rod, I don't actually have anything to go on the end here, so all I'm going to do is just put a bend in the bar here, and it'll just stop this from sliding off the end. Again, I've done that before, but just one little tip: if you bend it down over, then it's always got the force of its flotation against the bend. So again, it just stops it popping off. And that's basically it. I know it's a short video, it's a very simple thing to do, and hopefully this will help you out a little bit. Obviously I do have to drill a second hole there and put a second rivet in, and this cable here I will twist them up, put a zip tie around them just to hold them in place. And yeah, we're basically there with that. That's it in a nutshell, as they say. So yeah, hopefully that helped you out. Anyway, that's it for this video. Well, I'm now going to get this put onto the van, so yeah, there we go. Like, subscribe, come back and see me sometime, and have a good one.